see in blue where they're proposing to grade and create a little bit of a swale. If you go to the next slide, please. Yeah. And we had a lengthy discussion about the how stormwater is going to flow in the rear properties at the southeast corner. What discussion was they were going to do one swale that runs along the back of the house and then does a 90-degree turn basically towards Newcastle Drive. And while that may protect the neighbor on paper, from the stormwater impact, staff had the concern about the practicality of putting a few inches of soil in, taking it out, putting it up, berming it a little bit, and making this happen. Because although, the engineer does the plans and the calculations look great, there's other things involved. Let's say fences might be built, sprinkler system goes in, and the sodding people, all of which are not done by the engineer. So that's where the breakdown between what's on the site plan and what gets built kind of happens. So they did modify their plans a little bit where they refined the swale, added a few inches to the berm, but you're still talking about 5 to 7 inches, which really isn't much when you're talking about soil and grass. So, well, they refine it. They did bring, as you can see in the bottom left of the corner there, they have the proposed swale, and they gave us some calculations based on different storms. And this one's the 100-year storm of the capability of that swale and the amount of water that they're calculating draining over there. So that's what they did provide us. At the end of the day, though, staff's concern is that when it's built, will this actually be able to function as it, kind of noting with this, all the lines on the paper. So staff asked for two things. One, and this is where the discussion at the last commission was, we discussed putting in berming it up a little bit, putting an inlet and a pipe that leads out to the street, which in staff's mind would probably really help, with stormwater. But the petitioner noted, they would rather stick with the berm. If they are going to do the berm, then staff has requested an as-built, as was discussed at the last commission meeting, an as-built for the grading there to make sure that it is on point. But further than that, even with the as-built, if it's honestly not working as intended, and if there is a big mushy area in that red that just stops and gets kind of caught there in ponds, staff would also put a condition on that. If that's not going to work, then do something else. You might have to consider a French drain or something if that's not going to happen. Next, and then a few other items that we did note. You can go back one more, I'm sorry. We also talked about a few other things, one being the sump pump, which I'm sorry I don't have it highlighted here, but the sump pump is now discharging. We talked about the impact. It's discharging in the front of the lot in the southwest corner there. So it is actually, Carlos, your mouse is a little bit to the left and to the south, just a little bit. Or there's a number 5 there you could barely see. But it is discharging further than the house, so that's no longer a concern regarding the impact on a house. We also talked about the driveway, and so they're building a 3-car garage, and they started off with a 28-foot wide driveway, which, in looking at other properties, we really wanted to reduce that width. So they originally came back with a 12-foot opening, and then it went to the full 28. Staff did inform them that the code calls for at least a 16-foot wide apron when you reach the street. So they did revise it from a 12 to a 16. So the 16 is what is before you today. And if you get to the next slide, please. The other item that Steph had concern about during the construction and the health of a tree that is within the right of way, basically a lot of water. So this is where you try to solve one problem and another one pops up. A lot of water, not a lot of water, but water does flow towards Newcastle, that's the street behind. There's some erosion that looks like it has happened around the tree roots, and including where you can see the curb, you can see where the soil doesn't meet the curb. So there's some erosion going on, and staff has concerns during the construction, especially when there's no ground cover, that that steps need to be taken to minimize the erosion to protect that tree. So the petitioner did note that they're going to have their contractor place mulch around the tree or use another means to prevent the erosion from happening around this tree. With that, staff will pause and ask the commission for any questions or comments that they may have tonight. And the petitioner's engineer, Mr. Meeks, is on this evening.
Questions for Jonathan?
This is Saunders, none here.
Hey, Mike?
No, I don't have any. I think they did a nice job on simplifying the front elevation. I would point out, Jonathan, that they did also simplify the roof, and they got rid of the metal roof and just are doing an asphalt shingle too. So yeah, I think it's a step in the right direction. So.
Oh, I see that. Yeah. Oh, I did miss that. Yeah, good call.
Anybody
I
else?
think it looks much better. Everything that we asked for, it looks like it was somewhat accomplished. That's for sure. I'd be interested to see what are you going to attach to the building permit that they have to show you the as-built, and then are you guys going to re-inspect it after the as-built are turned in?
Yes, we will.
Okay.
So are we pretty satisfied with the design of the physical design of the house? What about the stormwater question that Jonathan brought up?
Again, this is Mike. I think Jonathan described, a solution they were comfortable with and a backup plan if it doesn't work. So I guess the one question I did have, Jonathan, it was unclear to me, but this is, you talked about erosion around that tree, but they'll have it goes without saying that there'll be a SWIP plan in place and there'll be erosion control around the entire site during construction, correct?
That's yes and no. So there is erosion on any site. You will see two things. One is a orange fencing normally, or some type of fencing like that, and the other is a siltation, either via the like I don't want to call it a net, but a net or some type of hay bales or something like that. That is more about the water quality coming off a site, and a lot of times that can stop a velocity or the flow of water, but that always doesn't. But really the biggest concern is that we really want to point that out so it does get addressed, but there are general items that are looked at, but I would say with the caveat that we have standards that are just general. You always put down siltation, but are some areas more impacted than others or needs more siltation than others? Probably so, to control. So
Yeah, that sounds like a discussion for another time, or
yeah,
part of the discussion we're having. Yeah.
and not, I mean, they mentioned what they need to do on this one, but yeah, that's a bigger discussion for stormwater management. So.
Yeah.
Jonathan, did the petitioner say specifically why they preferred the stormwater control to be just by using a berm rather than infrastructure?
I think, I mean, they are here tonight, but I think the general item is that, the general reason is that the more you put, like, the more you put stuff like a facility underground, the more it can go wrong. So let's say if there was a pipe underground, it may clog over time, just like anything needs maintenance. So it's really more of a maintenance component on there than anything else. And if I'm, I mean, Mr. Meeks is on for 828 Newcastle, the petitioner's representative, so he can answer more than that. But generally speaking, it's a maintenance item.
Okay. Does the planning commission have any other comments? Carlos, you want to bring the petitioner?
And he should be coming in. 1 second. Mr. Meeks?
Oh,
Hey, Ryan. All right,
Oh.
I have Ryan Meeks with THD Design Group, and if there's any questions or any comments, Mr. Meeks?
no, I would just reiterate what Jonathan said, that for the main reason for desiring the berm and the swale over the yard drain with the pipe is there's always a possibility of the yard drain clogging and need for maintenance over time. Whereas the swale, you don't really need maintenance, and I really don't see a need for a pipe, for a yard draining pipe, as long as the swale and the berm are built to plan, as Jonathan has mentioned.
Anybody on the commission have any questions for the developer?
Not I.
No? Okay. Carlos, do you want to, does anybody from the public have any comments?
And if there's anybody that has comments regarding this agenda item, if you can just show your hand, I'll transfer you over.
Okay, Carlos, while we're doing that, I wanted to ask, have we heard and asked any of the neighbors and the trustees for any comments on this petition?
I do know notifications have been issued by the city to all properties within 300 feet. We haven't had, the city hasn't initiated any direct contact that I'm aware of with the association.
I will just quickly note I was just copied on one email from the petitioner to one of the trustees, and that's so we're aware they did send an email to them with the plans, but that's all that staff's aware of. So there's no other contact with the subdivision trustees.
Madam Chair, if I could just ask a question, what is the date of that email you're identifying, Mr. Roper, please?
I'm sorry, Missy, could you repeat that? You faded out.
I just want to know the date that email has on it for the
Oh, good
notification, sir and ma'am.
Jonathan, did you hear that?
Yes, I did. The date of, I'll do two things real quick. Just give me 1 second. The Staff notes that the original notifications went out on October 15th, and the subdivision trust, that email from the petitioner to the subdivision trustee was on October 28th, 2020.
Okay. Thank you. Carlos, anybody from the public want to comment?
Nobody's raised their hands.
Okay. So, anything else from the commission? Do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion. This is Mike.
Okay, Mike,
Make a motion to approve the petition for site plan, community design and concept stormwater management plan review for a new single-family home at 828 Newcastle Drive as presented in the memorandum from the Department of Planning and Community Development dated November 5th, 2020, subject to any staff conditions noted herein.
I will second that motion. This is Richard.
we have a motion on the floor and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying
Chairman,
aye.
given that we are doing it virtually, if we can do a roll call vote.
Oh,
Okay.
thank you. Sorry.
So
Aye.
I will note for the chair that Commissioner Saunders had made the motion. Commissioner Brophy seconded, and I'll go ahead and call the vote.
Please do.
Commissioner Spiegelglass,
Approved.
Commissioner Saunders,
Approved.
Commissioner Lewis,
Aye.
Commissioner Brophy,
Approved.
Commissioner Rich,
Approved.
and Commissioner Wagner.
Yes.
And I will note that the motion is passed unanimously.
Very good.
Thank you very much for your time. Have a good evening.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank the petitioner for cooperating and listening to our concerns and responding to them.
Sure.
Very much so.
Thank you.
Okay. We are ready to move on to new business. Our first item on the agenda is 865 Alden Drive. Petition type is a site plan community design review. Description is 3-foot rear setback variation for a deck. Petitioner is Eric Donnerheim, Chesterfield Fence and Deck, and the property owner is Suku Kim. And if I butchered either or both of those names, I apologize. And is this Carlos or Jonathan?
I'm going to just kind of introduce the item real quick, and then Jonathan will get into the specifics. But this is a petition regarding the construction of a deck, which per chapter 400 is considered an accessory structure. When we reviewed the deck, we found that the deck, which is attached to the home, extends into the rear yard, the rear yard setback for the property. And currently, the interpretation of, I believe it's Article 16, accessory structures, the commission has authority to grant variations or variances, regardless of what term you use, to the setback for this type of structure. So therefore, we made the decision that we would bring this to the commission for review and action in accordance with the site plan and community review standards under the accessory structure guidelines. We'll talk about this later in the meeting regarding variations and variances. But at this point, staff is just following past practice when accessory structures under the current ordinance are authorized for some leniency or variances through the Plan Commission, and that's why this item is before us. Mr. Roper is more knowledgeable with the specifics and talked with the property owner and guided them through the process. So I'll let him go through that. But I just wanted to know why this was under the review of the commission as opposed to the Board of Adjustment.
Thank you, Carlos. Jonathan, you want to take us through it?
Be happy to. So we have the deck, the proposed deck, which is a roughly, I had in a staff report, it's, oh man, I'm sorry, it's around 75 square feet, I'm sorry, 75 square feet. It's juts out from the house towards the back of the property line around 9 feet, and it's about 10 feet in width, and it actually goes at an angle at the end, so it's not, instead of being 90 square feet, it would go at an angle, so it's 75 square feet in total. Existing, there is a patio back there, and patios are authorized to be up to, if it's over 120 square feet, it's authorized to be up to 10 square feet, so they really don't get any latitude if there's already something existing there, because a deck is under its own category under accessory structures. The deck is around 4.5 feet in height, which does not exceed what's under the accessory structure code. It goes up to 5 feet there. The deck is nestled between in the back of the house, creates about an L there, as you can see. The existing house already encroaches over the rear yard setback, and the rear yard setback on a lot is 20 feet. In measuring the lot depth, it's 20% of the lot depth, and anything that is, and there's a minimum setback of 20 feet. So in this case, the minimum setback would be 20 feet. Staff would also note that under Article 16 accessory structures and uses, and this is one of those other reasons not to go to the board at this point, but decks, if this was a deck that was not attached to the house, it could be up to 10 feet from the rear property line. So, but if it's attached to the house, it notes that it needs to be within the setback of the house. And looking at any impacts on the different neighboring properties to the south, which is on the side of going downwards, it really is pretty far away. I think at least 40 feet or so away from the house to the south. And to the west, there is fencing and a lot of plants and just brush back there. So it's really not, the stuff that's in their backyard is less visible to the adjoining neighbor. Staff would also note, and here's a few, so you could see the star represents, that's where the existing house kind of jets out at. On the opposite side there would be the deck, and you can see where the property line is, and there's a whole lot of vegetation back there. So staff felt, as in this particular case, the rear yard setback, the placement of this under site plan review would not have the impacts that are negative towards any of the neighbors. Staff also notes that we did receive a signed statement from the neighbor to the back, noting that they are fine with the setback variations for this. At this point, the petitioner is on the call, and staff is open for any questions or comments the commission may have.
Any questions from anyone on the commission?
Yeah, this is Mike. I don't have any.
Carlos?
Petitioner? Chairman, we're transferring over the petitioner, Eric Darenheim. And as soon as he's on, give me 1 second.
Sure.
Eric, I show you on with the video off, but I don't see any audio. Not sure if you can hear us. And here we go, this transfer.
Sorry, I forgot this.
All right, we can hear you now, sir.
Does Eric, do you have anything to say? Anything you want to add to the commission?
No, other than just that the existing house already has an addition, which was shown on the site plan, which is about 9 feet from the property line, but that was already shown previously. So no, I do not have anything to say.
Does anyone on the commission have any questions for the petitioner?
No.
No? Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion?
And Chairman, if there's an opportunity, if there's anybody in the public that would like to speak to this item, if you can show your hand. And Chairman, there being none.
Okay. Any further discussion by the commission? And not hearing none, do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion. Motion to approve the petition for community design and site plan review for a deck to be allowed a 17-foot setback from the rear property line at 865 Alden Drive, as presented in the memorandum from the Department of Planning and Community Development dated November 5th, 2020, subject to any staff conditions noted therein.
And do I hear a second?
I will second that motion.
We have a motion on the floor that has been seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Oh, I'm sorry. Carlos, can you take the roll?
Yes. We had a motion that was made by Commissioner Lewis, and that motion was seconded by Mr. Brophy. And upon on a roll call vote, Commissioner Spiegelglass,
Approved.
Commissioner Saunders,
Approved.
Commissioner Lewis,
Approve.
Commissioner Brophy,
Approved.
Commissioner Rich,
Approved.
and Commissioner Wagner.
Yes.
And the motion is approved unanimously.
Okay.
Mr. Durenheim, I'm going to switch you over.
Thank you.
Okay. Our next item on the agenda is variations, and we do have a staff report. And Carlos, do
No,
you
no,
want-
there is no written report on there.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Sorry about that.
You want to
Well.
tell us about it?
Sure. At the city council, there was some discussion regarding some of the workload to the commission. And they had asked the city attorney to do an inquiry regarding these variations and variances, and specifically was to review the fencing ordinance and see what components of the fencing can be referred to the zoning board of adjustment, as opposed to the planning and community design commission. That should, I think we see about 3 per year, should revert some of those in there. And what we'll do is have the city attorney at one of our upcoming meetings, more than likely in December, in there, because there's also some questions for the attorney regarding the urban agricultural ordinance that would be best to kind of get those all done at once. In addition to that, we'll be looking at the variance standards, such as the one that was discussed today for the deck on Alden. Those should, the code, the code section, the way it's written right now, provides the commission the authority to do a review on a setback, and that primarily should be the role of the Board of Adjustment. So we're going to reassess that criteria. And the reason we do that is because the board has a set standard for the review, and the burden is on the petitioner to justify why that standard isn't applicable to the property that they're on, as opposed to it being more of a design or aesthetic issue in there. And that can lead to different interpretations or results depending on location and such. So we'll have that discussion, like I said, probably in our next upcoming meeting, but I would like Mr. Martin, our city attorney, to be in attendance at that time. be glad to answer any specific questions regarding the changing some of the variation processes, if there are any.
Okay. Any questions for Carlos before we move on? Okay, then our next item on the agenda is urban agriculture.
All right, Chairman, if I can have a second just to get back to our screen.
Yes.
Okay, so we had the latest draft put together, and the link is now active on the agenda in there. And what we've done, at least here to kind of summarize, we've addressed some of the principal questions that were asked at that last meeting. I apologize, I tried to write down the questions really quickly as we reviewed the video, and then provide a response there in red, and those are shown more specifically in the draft ordinance that you have in there. And just to note where we are in the process, because there was a question, I think, from the public in there. So this was brought to us by the city council with an anticipation that by October we would have some draft to forward to them. But that being said, this became a little bit more complex. There were more questions and inquiries than what we had initially anticipated. We did go back to the council through our liaison, noting that we were going to need some extra time to try to address this and get this right. And we've progressed to the draft that you have along with those applications. And there are still some outstanding items that need to be addressed, and some legal conversations that need to be taken up with more specifically the city attorney, and I'll get into those in just a second. So from our last meeting, there was questions about, how long does someone have to remove a rooster once that it is found. Our recommendation is 6 weeks. That's about 42 days from the date of notification in there. And the reason is in the purchase of chicks or young chickens, there's really not a clear verification of which one's if one is gonna end up being a rooster. But when there is the identification of a rooster and it's brought to the city's attention, our notice would say that they have 6 weeks to find relocation or remove the rooster from the property. We think that's a reasonable time frame to do so. Now, again, these would be assessed every year through the permitting process. This is really just if somebody bought a group of chickens that we would, and one ended up by chance to be a rooster or more than one, they would have an opportunity to make the necessary coordination to remove the rooster. There was a question about whether, limitations on anybody on private property selling honey, if they were harboring bees, and we would consider that prohibited, the selling of any commodity, whether it's honey or eggs. The purpose of this ordinance is to allow our residents to perform their own urban agriculture for their personal use or for hobby, not for the purpose of commerce in any sort or way. So the primary intent here is for personal consumption. It's not if somebody is selling eggs or if they are selling honey, they would be in violation of the code. And the process for that is that they would get notified. We'd verify what's going on, make sure that they're aware of the code, and then follow up to see that in the end that they're following through. And that's the same standard that's applied just as well with any other regulation. There was a question about bee allergies and neighboring properties, both if they're pre-existing or if a neighbor over time moves in and that neighbor has bee allergies, or bee allergies evolve in a person to become severe. And that's really a legal discussion we need to have with the city attorney. And again, the goal would be to coordinate with them probably at our December meeting. Once there was a question regarding like, once you decide not to continue harboring chickens or bees, there needs to be a requirement for removal of the structures. That has been added to the proposed ordinance language that you have. Also, that on the handouts, there should be a reference of a date, because these forms change over time, so we can make sure that when we refer to a resident, the current conditions, that there's a date that we can advise them on, that the most current forms are dated. And I have, for example, put 2020, November 15th on the ones that were copied and supplied to you. If we ever revise those, we would put a new date on that, and that's how we would keep track. And most importantly, one of the biggest things that we got in a prolonged discussion was about other animals and all that. And I want to go back to at this point, the council is looking solely to put regulations specifically for chickens and bees. And I wrote down pigs there, and I apologize, in there, which produce a commodity, whether it's eggs or honey for personal use. As we kind of evaluated the discussion that was taking place at our last meeting, it got, we talked about the pot-bellied pigs, snakes, and I think the rabbits, hawks, and, it wasn't for the intention of trying to regulate pets. It's trying to regulate, using the term livestock or animals that produce a commodity that can be consumed on private property. And again, to kind of narrow down, the preference of the council is to kind of narrow down and focus on the chickens and the bees. If it continues, again, we'll have that discussion with the city attorney about whether that should even be permitted because of the allergy concerns, but not to expand into pet, other livestock as pets in there. And I hope that makes a clear distinction, because I think, somewhere down the road, we are going to have to address those issues and concerns that the commission discussed. But I think they would be done separately from those that produce commodity to those as other pets that would be permitted beyond animals, cats, beyond dogs, cats, and such. I figured that would lead to some questions, and I'll be glad to answer those if there are.
I actually do have one. Carlos, is there a way, or by this ordinance, are we prohibiting it? If somebody wanted to come in and get a home occupation, or I guess we have on a home occupation permit, and sell bees or honey through a home occupation?
Under the current ordinance, any resident that sells a product on their property, and has stores and sells a product from their property would be a violation of the home occupation code. Now, they may conduct a business and transaction, but the storage of the product and the exchange of the product is supposed to occur in some other site, or it's mailed or so.
So you could theoretically produce honey on your property and mail it to your customers. Are we saying no?
We're saying no, but theoretically, yes, it can happen.
Okay.
I mean, the intent of this ordinance is for the person that does this as a hobby for personal consumption, not for the purposes of running. At that point, they're running a farm of some sort.
Right. So we're not. So we're trying to keep the transaction essentially off of residential property.
Not through this ordinance, but through our business ordinances and our home occupation ordinance. The intent of those ordinances is to keep those commercial transactions not to take place in residential properties. Okay. So you don't have a customer coming to your house knocking in there. Now, can they do this online or through some mail catalog system, I'm sure they could. But again, we're restricting the number of hives they can have the property. So again, so it can more be reflective of somebody doing this for a hobby or for personal use, not for a larger consumption.
Okay.
Very good questions. And again, the intent and goal of the ordinance is to try to address that. And if it doesn't, you know, we're open to look at what other means we can.
So may I suggest that in the purpose and intent that we specify that?
Very good question. Really, yes.
Anybody else have anything they want to comment
I
on?
have a question. What happens when somebody moves out of the area, Olivet, and they have chickens or they had, beehives?
A good question, and that was one of the comments that was posted at that last meeting. Within those regulations, there is now a section that says that you have to remove all the associated structures and restore the site, the area that the site was on, and that would be on either page 6 of 15 within the ordinance section, and then when you get to the application handouts, it provides that same detail again.
Carlos, this is Mike. How would you manage that? Would that be through the occupancy permit inspections or something like that?
There would
being able
be,
to tell what, yeah.
Yeah, a good question. Yeah, there is a couple of opportunities to follow up and make sure that it's in compliance. One is they are to be inspected every year. So if we didn't receive the call, we'd be trying to reach out to them, finding out why it hasn't been inspected, and they need to get the inspection. And we could find out that they've either they've stopped or they sold the property or aren't there because it's not transferable. Two, if it is through a home occupancy inspection, it could be noted on the report and then verified for the final that it has to be removed in there. And those do happen through the application year. So there are opportunities to follow up and check on those. So if there are other means or mechanisms, we're open to consideration, but I think both of those two should be able to catch if somebody just decided to abandon or no longer follow through.
Hey, Carlos, this is Mike. Just kind of a follow-up question, because this recently happened where we had some neighbors who were renting an adjoining property, and one weekend they were there, and the next weekend they left, and stayed in Olivet, bought a house, but they were gone. But I'm thinking about that we do have rental houses or houses that are rented here in Olivet, and is that contemplated here, or does that make any difference whether it's the owner of the property requesting this or if it's someone who is renting?
No, we would allow the occupant of the property to submit an application. The owner of the property does have to sign off on the application. I think that was the intent, and there's a section on each of those. And then they're required the annual inspection. Now, rental properties through the city are required to be inspected every 2 years. So there would be a mechanism to follow up if one went missing. But again, that occupant would have to be on an annual permit process with the city.
And I guess at the end of the day, the property owner is going to be the responsible party of his tenant, her tenant. Yeah, takes off. Okay.
Good question.
Carlos, sorry,
Brian?
two questions. I guess I'm curious, are these guidelines similar to like we put guidelines for fences and things like that? So if somebody said, well, I have a rooster, but my neighbors don't care. I've surveyed them all. They've all responded. The rooster's not loud, or we're far enough away. are we willing to grant exceptions, or is it a hard fast? And then
It-
second question I had is, we talked about, you know, I assume we're gonna have rules around sizes of coops and sizes of, you know, hives. You know, does a separate law cover things like smell for whether it's an animal or a coop or something like that as well?
Okay, couple of questions on that. So in regards to exceptions, no, the ordinance is specifically clear that of those that are permitted, the chickens, that roosters are prohibited. And there is again, what we thought was a reasonable time for somebody to find a relocation on there in there. The second question was regarding the sizes, and those are both in the accessory code and in the application in terms of restricting those. And then I believe the third question was about the negative effects that can happen with these. And yes, they do fall. I mean, we do have nuisance code criteria for odor in there. We've had issues on trying to apply the nuisance code for some other activities such as noise and even the odor. The burden of proof is put on the city to justify that. So they are somewhat difficult to do. Within these applications, we provide some standards that I think will give us a little bit more guidance and a little bit more strength in there. And on those handouts, it is noted on the operation regulations and housing regulations about the maintenance of feces, you know, the taking care of the feces, the placement of the food and its location, trying to keep out rodents and all those. So if you're not following those within the application, the goal would be to make sure that the application is clear enough that we could say, well, we're not going to issue you a permit because you've been in violation of these the bullet points. And that would be on page 8 of 15 on that for chickens. And I believe page 13 of 15 for bees.
Okay. No, those all make sense. Thank you.
Do they, Carlos, this is Mike, do they have to reapply or and fill out this whole form each year? Is that the intent, that they would actually apply, or is it a renewal where they just come in and pay a fee?
We are asking that they have to reapply each year.
Okay.
There, you know, in the reference information that was provided, there are some communities that go beyond the 12 months. Right now, I think for the application is to authorize for 1 year.
Okay, so they would, and the intent is, even though nothing's changed, you're asking them to fill out this application, and I mean, it doesn't look like it's that difficult to do, but you would be expecting it to be filled out each year. Okay.
Correct. And again, in that reference of information that you had, again, we're proposing this in there, and you know, these ordinances can evolve, but there were some communities that did more than 1 year. There were some communities that did after so many positive inspections that it would revert to you didn't have to come in or have a follow-up anymore. I think for now we're kind of looking at just the 1 year aspect.
Carlos, I could see some advantages that if someone comes in, applies for a permit, if as a part of that approval process, we require, or the city sends out notices to the surrounding neighbors. It includes the application form with the operation requirements on it, so that the neighbors will know what's going on. I see it as more of an informational
We can take a look at
task.
that.
But I'm not sure what we would do if somebody says they object, but I think if they're informed as to what the operating regulations are, that would take care of it.
From a staff perspective, and given the resources we have, the preference would be that we would be glad to post addresses on our website where permits have been issued, along with the information for the conditions of their housing, as opposed to do those notifications. Because at some point, and the goal here was not to create a permit mechanism to create revenue, but there is a cost associated to every time that's taken from another task and such. So here we're proposing a minimum fee of $25 for the annual inspection to cover the staff costs of somebody going to verify that these things are in place. If we start expanding to notifications, then I need to be a little bit more cognizant of the costs that is incurred by expending, staff resources to go out there or put that information together. That being said, again, we have to have that discussion about bees with the city attorney, because that is different. On the chicken coops, I'm not sure, how what that would produce if somebody didn't see them in there. Now, where it would make a difference, of course, if somebody had a rooster within that chicken group and that went off, I'm sure somebody, we've gotten calls before. It's like, well, where is it? And we didn't know because we didn't have a mechanism to track. And it took a while before it was narrowed down to where the property was in there. And, again, I think the way we're looking to draft this is, if we get rid of the roosters and the big principal noise is out, and it's just left to the chickens. And I think the standards about the maintenance, the care, the feeding, and the removal of the waste product should minimize any impact to adjacent properties. But we can keep an eye on it too. I mean, if it we can always come back if it doesn't work.
I'm just speaking, if somebody in my neighborhood wanted to build a chicken coop, I would have lots of questions. And I just see that as being a way of
there's where
easily informing without.
Absolutely. Well, and that's where the fundamental question before the commission and that the council is looking for is whether in our community we would authorize the harboring of chickens, and under what conditions, so we don't have to go on a case by case basis. And the council has indicated that they're comfortable considering up to 6 without it being a prolonged process to try to do that. That's equitable, that is sustainable, and provides opportunities for our residents that want to engage in those type of activities. I think if it was going to be more than the 6, or maybe the 6 is too much, then there would be another tier. And that is something we can look at in the future to see if we start getting requests that they want to have, a dozen or so. And then maybe at that point, that really does warrant more notification or questions. But if right now we have several properties where they have chickens and no notification is issued to adjacent properties. But there are no standards in place. At least this point, we'll have the standards in place. There still wouldn't be a notification process in there. But if the commission finds that no, neighbors should be informed beyond that, I mean, that's something we can consider. I don't think that, and I'll let the liaison, if there's any comments on that the intent was to do a notification for those, but you're just reviewing and considering what the commission puts together.
That is correct.
I think there's no perfect number. I agree with you, Carlos. I think, you know, we start with this. I like the idea that the roosters are just prohibited and there isn't exceptions. The fact that we have the structures covered, nuisance covered, it seems like a starting point. If we find that this is something that becomes an issue, then I think we revisit, you know, and people might be grandfathered, but we can revisit. You've got to start somewhere, just like anything with fences or houses.
If I could, Commissioner and Carlos, what does Commissioner Lewis mean when you said other considerations or variables that we would come back and consider?
Well,
Define
what
that
I mean by
better for
that
me.
is if we find that there's a significant amount of complaints that people are finding 6 to be too many or structures are too large, we revisit, you know, like everything, you adjust. So.
This is Richard. Carlos, do you mind if I run through a couple of comments on the language of the ordinance as it's written?
Absolutely, yes. Always
Just-
appreciate it.
Some of these are nits, I apologize, but I just figured we'd run through them quickly. One, I'm on page 5 of the PDF, the horticulture section. The section that talks about the native garden or prairie encompassing 50% of the front yard area or 50% of the rear yard area. I think as it's read, that would only require review if it's exactly 50%. I think we should say greater than, if that's what the intention is.
Yes. Thank you, sir.
The next one is on PDF page, scrolling, PDF page 9, the regulations for the chickens, specifically bullet point 5, which is the chickens running at large, which is never a phrase I thought I would utter, but here we are. The first 2 sentences of this bullet make a lot of sense to me. The third sentence seems contradictory unless I'm missing something. It says the chicken shall be deemed to be permitted to run at large when the premises is not securely enclosed by a proper boundary fence. It seems like all they have to do is not put a fence up and then they can just let their chickens run around.
No, we'll take a look at that. I think Ms. Waldman had also brought that to my attention. I apologize, I didn't get that.
Another question on that same page, the housing regulations, we have these setback provisions, and I may be missing this. I'm open to being educated on this, but as far as the setback definitions are concerned, I believe all these need to be satisfied. And so if it has to be behind the footprint from a front yard perspective and also behind the footprint from a side yard perspective, is that possible or am I misreading that? It seems like it needs to be written differently. My reading of this is that the coop has to be located in the shadow. If you're looking at the front of the house, it has to be located in the shadow of the house from the front. But then from the side, it also has to be located in the shadow, but that's not possible if it also has to be in the shadow of the front projection.
Yeah.
Am I making sense?
Yes. And I'll take a look at those. I think I think for instance, the parent 2 is just completely off.
Yeah.
And then I'll take a look at the reading on number 1.
Okay. And then on the next page, this is very nitpicky, but we transition from having periods at the end of our bullet points to having semicolons and semicolon to ands. I think those should just all be periods.
We'll take care of those.
Hey, Richard, this is Mike. Before you go past the housing regulations, what's the thinking on corner lots where we think about them as having 2 fronts? Or are we going to just establish the front like we typically do, and then the other one would be considered the side yard?
That'd be my vote.
Yeah. I'm just thinking about it. We had this house today, or we looked at earlier during the meeting. I was just thinking about, we were sort of looking at the elevations like they were fronts, and regarding the guidelines. So,
right.
Yeah.
And then the next comment, if may I move on, Mike?
Yes, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No problem at all. PDF page 15 is regarding the beehives. It says right under the applicant acknowledges that they understand the keeping of up to, and then we have 3 beehive body frames. And I'm not sure, I don't think there needs to be an N dash there. I think it should be 3 beehive body frames. And that same comment applies throughout this section.
You said on page 15 of 15?
15, yes, yes, sir.
Want to make sure.
I don't know why I'm seeing page 13 out of 15. I don't know. Why.
I'm referencing the PDF page.
Oh,
So
I'm sorry. Okay.
PDF 15, yeah. So right, 13 of the document.
Okay.
That 3 beehive thing seems funky. And then down below that on the same page, we have a similar setback issue.
So we'll take a look at those.
And I think that's it.
All right.
Thank you, Richard.
Yes.
No problem.
Any comments or thoughts from anybody else on the commission? Carlos, what's your next step?
We'll continue to address, we got direction on the bullet points that were part of the front memo. We'll revise it accordingly with the comments that we received today, along with the corrections. And we'll coordinate with Mr. Martin to schedule him in an attendance to have a discussion regarding the bees and the allergies. And then if there are any other broader questions specific to this ordinance that are best, answered, by the attorney as opposed to me or Johnson.
Okay, so if we think about anything else over the next couple of weeks, we should let you know.
Correct. And some of the things I think that we need to give serious consideration is probably an inventory of those that are existing, utilizing that inventory probably to do some notifications, and the commission even maybe having an actual public hearing that provides an opportunity for both for residents and those that are going to be impacted to provide comment on there, and see if we can try to get that before year's end.
I like the idea of a hearing, just to allow the community to have input into the process.
Well, I'm thinking more, those that are going to be impacted by those that are following current practices and getting a perspective or view on how these conditions will impact them.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll find out who's got more than 6 or who's operating bees and what their thoughts are about annual inspections and such.
It sounds like a good idea to me. Anybody else have any comments? Jody?
No, I'm good with other suggestions.
Okay, so are we ready to move on to our next agenda item?
Chairman, as soon as you said, there are 2 attendees on the public side. Do you want to
Oh, yes,
allow any public comment?
absolutely.
Mr. and Mrs. Solomon or Mr. Rochester, if you have any comments, if you can raise your hand. All right. Chairman, I think we're good.
Okay. Our next agenda item then is stormwater management. And Jonathan, did you want to take us through that item?
Carlos, do you want to start off or should I kick it off?
No, I'll let you, Jonathan, kind of go over the items, starting with the wherever you want to start on the slides. If you want to start on this page or
No, this is totally fine. So we're continuing our stormwater management discussion. The idea around all this discussion that we've been having for the last couple months is to actually create some type of planning effort going forward for the city and to do more. But there's a lot of information, as we have discussed and presented in the last couple months, and we need to start looking at solution. Well, we identified different issues, and we're looking for solutions. We're to prioritize planning efforts, changing policies, ordinances, and in some cases even possibly funding. So in this case, today, what we'll have, and this is we're starting to formulate the different parts of the plan. So before we went through just the 7 items that you see before you, the construction, vegetation, impervious space, infrastructure, soils, topology, and weather, we discussed with different pictures and videos and information what impacts these things and why do all these things matter. The next component that we're going to start going through are more of the solutions. And we asked the commission to keep an open mind about all of this. All questions and comments are on the table at this point because we really just want to get a good sense of what's out there. You know, what do we miss? What do you want to clarify? And then to narrow things more down. So in this case, on this slide here, we have the 7 focus areas. You know, again, if there needs to be an 8th, like we started with 5 and we added the like impervious space because, you know, to really know like parking spaces that came up on a number of occasions. So we had like impervious space, or vegetation is another one that we added. So if there's anything else that we need to add. But on the top of the table, so the second row in black writing, you see some of the items that can be issues that impact stormwater. And on the red on the bottom in the writing looks at some of the solutions or just topical solution areas that we can start looking at. I'll go through these. So under construction, we look at, you know, if a house or an improvement's under construction, there's either no structure in the site for a little bit, there's no ground cover, there's just dirt. What are the impacts during construction, and what different policy and items that we can do as a city to control those? So under construction, we look at siltation control, improving the quality of water that runs off a site. Also, the amount of dirt, the amount of water that runs off a site. How do we manage through siltation control, possibly stormwater detention during a site, because that's not required right now, but there's a lot more runoff in the 6 months to 18 months that a house is under construction. Also during construction, there's usually when you're digging out the foundation, there's most new houses come with a basement, so there's a massive amount of dirt on site. So and I mentioned all these solutions, not that we don't have policies in place today, but we're just throwing out there everything, either policies that we do have in place, policies that we may want to consider, or just topics we want to consider. So excessive dirt's another one, and I know that in the last year we did change our policy to try to remove that mound of dirt sooner rather than later, but that's noted under the construction side. Vegetation, we look at, you know, looking at vegetation as a means to retain stormwater, either through the roots in the ground or even with a the canopy, the leaf canopies, where water can actually hit the leaf and not the ground and run off. and stay there for a little bit. So we look at tree preservation ordinance or policy, ground cover standards. So right now we have the traditional yard just has grass, and people can plant bushes or other vegetation types, but currently most new houses and most houses just have grass. That really doesn't do a lot for stormwater infiltration into the ground. So that's another thing that we would look at. Can we prescribe more keeping with grass, deeper rooted grass, where it doesn't look like anything out of the ordinary, but underground the roots really go down and help out. Rainscaping and the rain gardens. I know with the urban agriculture, we started talking about the standards for native plantings and all that, so that would also be discussed under there as well. The impervious space, so we're talking about the flat work being added, and again, this is not just residential, but this is commercial as well. So we have a lot of more impervious structures that go up. So what can we do about that? We have parking design standards. Per code, there is a parking code that says you must have a minimum amount of parking spaces. Is it time to revisit that? Are those standards contributing to us being over, not saying we are over parked, but can we change the standards so that either lessens parking in a way that is still beneficial to the business, but also pervious area is reclaimed, and grass and vegetation is reclaimed versus just having more impervious areas? Or maybe we do parking maximums where you only get a certain amount of parking because you really don't want we have minimums but no cap, no maximum. So should we start looking at that? Residential driveways is another. Right now we really don't have any limitations except for a residential driveway must be 5 feet from a property line. Currently today, someone could technically pave over their whole front yard. There's no regulations against that. I mean, some of you might say that's more of a design item, which is good too, so you don't have a parking lot, in front of your house. But besides the aesthetics, how can we look at stormwater being generated on a driveway, and what can we do about, whether it be more impervious driveways, which that might come at an expense, or is it more plantings to the side of a driveway or where the driveway drains, where your mailbox might be if it meets the street? Is there a little bit of a planting area there where water is directed before it runs on into the street? There's other site coverage standards, or vegetative areas to maintain. So areas to maintain, if there are rare drainage channels or places where there's a lot of stormwater, and then people want to put up a bunch of impervious areas to either impede that or make areas worse. Where are these areas to maintain, and how do we put policies? How do we recognize how do we recognize the areas, and how do we maintain those? Site coverage standards. So, and this goes into, for example, commercial properties. If you have, most commercial properties, you have a landscaped island. So you have just a little curb with some dirt, grass, and one tree sticking out. Can these areas provide more stormwater solutions? Currently, if you have a tree island with a curb, water does not flow into one of these landscaped areas. Instead, it actually would flow off into a sewer. So how can we, maybe mix more rainscaping, rain gardens with landscaped areas to get a little more stormwater control? Infrastructure, this mainly goes to, it's not only about the pipes that you don't see pipes underground because they're underground, but the pipes or the inlets. It's also about where water is flowing in a collective manner. So as we've seen in the past, there are inlets that are disconnected from other inlets, or there's an inlet that opens up a pipe into someone's backyard and drains over a few yards and picks up somewhere else. So looking at where should we begin thinking about piping water, as well as for the areas that maybe piping is not the best solution, or maybe it's a really expensive solution. So we look at doing more what's called like a gabion swale, or just like vegetative swales that manage water as it goes downhill. So you're not piping it, but you're creating more of a flow that's more manageable. Under soils, where we have from the high water table levels to the types, the consistency of soil, and allowing water to infiltrate into it, which is also the permeability of that. Solutions could be looking at, the ground covered standards, rainscaping, so how to make soils more permeable by mixing it with other materials, natural organic materials that would allow water to seep into the ground more rather than just flowing off. We get to the topology side, where dealing with the elevations and the contours. You always have the downhill slopes, which water starts flowing. The higher the slope, the faster the water goes. You always have properties that are lower than another, and they experience draining issues from the higher property. Excuse me. Of course, have the velocity, as I mentioned, when you have different slopes and the length of a slope. If you have a slope that's 5 feet versus 50 feet, you're going to get a lot more velocity off the longer slope. So looking at those items, erosion, the natural collection point, Olive Boulevard's a high point, but River de Pear, or that concrete channel / natural channel around Bond Price, Bond Hills Lane, that's a low point. So and looking at those items, we look to investigate the use of retaining walls to minimize slopes and velocity, which a lot of times also takes care of erosion. The gabion swales that can handle a lot of water in an area. So, again, instead of when water's going down, most of the infrastructure is usually in a place that is a natural low point. So in lieu of having a pipe, you might have these above ground swales that might help control that flow, along with rainscaping within these areas. The more brush and the more trees and stuff you put up, the more water will slow, and also which would be captured in the soil. We look at flood hazard areas with topology. Usually the lower spots are where the flood hazards are, but also looking at and combined with some of the other solutions besides identifying the flood hazard. How do you rainscape it? How do you provide standards that promote building, but also promote stormwater management? Again, streams and concentrated flows, those don't necessarily have to be at the bottom of the watershed. It could be between houses, where all the houses are draining to one area. That's a big issue as well. And we look at weather and what we can do. We know that we're seeing more intense and more intense storms. When it does rain, like they say, when it rains, it pours. So, and we also looked at the expected amounts, what months and when, so we can, other items that will at least help us look at this would be alerts. Sometimes there's less we can do about something, but we can, if we know we're at different flood levels, we can, start using those to our advantage to make people aware. Preemptive clearing and routine maintenance. So if we know it would be, we have a lot of inlets, and actually Olivet, for the most part, City of Olivet is not in charge of many of our sewers. Most of it's MSD or they're private. But if we go back to, let's say, topology, and we know where some of the low points are, some of the choke points are, instead of trying to clear every single inlet on a year by year or biannual basis or something like that, I actually identify the ones that if this were to back up, it would have the most damage in an area, or doing a routine maintenance or clearing. So when, hey, we know it's August or we know it's April, we need to make sure that these inlets on a low point on Mansfield, for example, are cleared of leaves and sticks and all that. Because one part of flooding, when it does flood, is if those inlets are backed up, like, beavers create a dam out of sticks and leaves and all that. Same thing happens with some of the inlets on a heavy storm. If that happens during a storm, no one's going out to fix it right away during a storm. So if we can save some of that trouble, and I think we can, that's what that is talking about there. And the next, we'll go on with discussion in just a moment, but so the next couple meetings we'll keep going. We're asked the commission for any other solutions. Maybe it's not worded correctly here, or maybe it just needs to be expanded upon, or it's I know there are duplicates on here because landscaping, for example, goes into many categories, not just one. But if there's other things to add, you could either email Carlos or myself, or if it's not during a meeting, but if you have ideas about that, or you can discuss them now if you like. With that, Carlos, if you have more to add on there.
Yeah, I think the intent in putting together this plan was to identify the primary contributors. And like Jonathan said, we started off with 5 with the assistance of the commission. We've gotten up to 7. I think they're broad. There still may be some others, but they gave us some guidance. Then within each of these primary contributors, we went through and tried to identify the causes, again with the commission. And then Jonathan has slowly taken us through an informative and educative process of how each one of these contributors, so we get a better understanding of what are their impacts and why. To now we're getting into that final phase of trying to identify solutions, ways to mediate the issue, or ways to be proactive and minimize the impact of these contributors. And it's kind of like a brainstorming session. So here we're providing those that Jonathan has gone through. Today's probably not best to go through each one by one, but to make sure that the commission has a direction of where we're going, and if that direction it is the right way to continue to pursue this and tackle the plan. And then at the next meeting, if we were to assign homework, if there are other things we should be adding to this, whether it's on causes or whether it's to solutions or ways to tackle the impact these contributors have. So, and again, I'm curious to see how this works. I think this will help us identify items that may be in each of these cells, you know, as they're shown here on the table. It's going to help us get an understanding of how many things can be done, help us prioritize which ones are the most important. That might be because they showed up in one or more than one of these columns, and then and get a better idea on how we want to spend our time from that point forward addressing stormwater.
Any comments from the commission?
I think as we go through them, and I agree, probably not tonight. I think it's its own meeting, but I'm curious what, we talk about, for example, an ordinance or acceptable grasses or things like that. I think it's going to have to go into detail of what are we suggesting? What is is it a recommendation? Is it a prohibit, what's prohibited? Is it a guideline? Is it, what's, I guess, what's the, how much weight is behind each one? And maybe we highlight what are the 3 or 4 that we think are going to make the biggest impact or the most immediate impact, and then start with those, because otherwise it'll take forever to go through all of these, I think.
Yes.
I had a similar thought. Some of these solutions, you start to thinking about them as ideas that you can mandate through ordinances, and that might be like the parking ratios. And I was struck today about the driveway width, where we had an applicant that was willing to put in a 12-foot driveway, and we mandated a 16-foot driveway. Do we start to sort of think about what we require? What can be done through just educational materials, and what could the city do, or encourage people to do, or how can we encourage the residents to help in this regard? What carrots can we put out there to help, whether it's a residential development, which have some impact, but it's going to be relatively smaller. The commercial developments that are obviously a lot bigger, but we don't really control that stormwater. That's all managed through MSD, but it all impacts us one way or the other. So.
Jonathan, I had a couple of comments I'd like to toss out there. One of the factors I was mulling over that falls, I think, under construction is site grading, which it could be part of the problem and it could be part of the solution, depending on what the issue is. So I'm not sure, maybe it belongs just in both places.
Okay.
Okay. Then one of the things I wanted to point out regarding the routine maintenance of inlets is that one of my personal pet peeves are the weeds that pile up, not just in front of the inlets, but just that grow around inlets. They're often uncared for, and they serve to block stormwater flow.
I'm sorry, you said the weeds. Where are they piling up? I'm sorry, I missed that.
They grow around inlets through the cracks in the concrete. And it's generally just some weed killer down around them, or pulling those weeds out would really help. And that's an easy maintenance solution. I just see that all over. It irritates me.
Commission Chair, I know I normally should not talk, but I do walk my dog every day, and I see a lot of stormwater outlets because she likes to sniff. And I also noticed that on the sides of the storm drains, there is erosion there as well. That is, on the lawn side of these structures, that then does create where vegetation stays, and like you say, it ends up causing things to clog up around there and stop that flow like you've just identified. So I find that there's land erosion as well right around the MSD sewer inlets on the ground side, not the pavement side, that also impedes that proper flow. So since you brought it up, I'm being a little verbal tonight. Thanks.
Thank you, Missy. Anything else from the commission? Any other thoughts? If you, as you mull this over the next few weeks and have any further thoughts, just send them on to Carlos and Jonathan.
Thank you.
Anything else on this topic? Okay.
Are we set, Jonathan?
Yep, that'll do it. Thank you, guys.
Then let's move on to other business meeting minutes. I guess, Carlos, did we have anybody from the public before we moved on? Is there anybody?
No.
Okay. Then let's go ahead to other business and meeting minutes. We have some meeting minutes to accept. Does anyone want to address that?
I'll acknowledge the receipt of the meeting minutes for October 15th, 2020.
Do I? So that
That's it.
doesn't need a second, does it?
Nope.
Okay. Thank you, Mike.
Mhm.
Oh,
And
before we go on, Carlos, there was those two items for infield and the solar panels.
Yes.
and under reports, Carlos, do you have anything to report?
Yeah, there's going to be two, we have there are traditional reports, but there are two items we're just going to bring to the commission's attention in there. One was regarding a recent appeal to the Board of Adjustment for the for a garage in the Chevy Chase subdivision. The garage itself, this is the existing site plan of the property, was placed in this area. It's a corner property in there, but because they were extending into the front building setback, we went with the preference that that the variation of the variance should be the role of the Board of Adjustment to justify why the structure should extend into the front yard setback. The garage itself complied with all the other aspects of the accessory structure ordinance. So therefore that, again, that wasn't the issue, and it did go to the Planning and Community Design Commission for review. And I'm going to show you real quickly the plans that were in place. Jonathan, which ones were they?
It was infield. It's under the normal infield folder, garage plans 0708.
Okay. All right. So this corner tip here where my mouse is, if you can see the little hand, is where the garage projected in front of the front building line. Again, if this was any other structure, it would have to go to the Board of Adjustment for variance requests, and therefore we felt it was best to forward that to the Board of Adjustment, which authorized the variance. Overall, it was a everything else in the detached garage met the standards in there. They did a very nice design job They kept a real low roof profile, and it was under the square footage. And of course, lower in height than the adjacent home in there. So we just wanted to make sure the commission was aware of it. Again, the size of the garage did not exceed the threshold requiring commission review. Having it come before because it went before the Board of Adjustment for the setback, it would be redundant to run it back to the commission to note that a variance has been granted in that setback, but the commission had to review it too. Plus, you know, it would be additional costs that I think would have been unwarranted. If there was concerns or issues with the design, and if there are from the commissions, please let us know. But you know, it looked like it was well thought out, well put, and we felt comfortable, you know, based on the Plan Commission's previous actions, that this, you know, these are the type of structures that the commission would try to encourage or embrace in there. We also looked at materials in there, and they were going to be comparable with the home.
Great.
The other item that we wanted to bring to the commission's review, and this is a picture of the plan, so it doesn't come out as well, but a neighbor here on our city center, it's the old Town and Tennis building on Dillman Industrial. It's been converted to over time to an office building and an enclosed garage. And I'm going to get a quick aerial here, so bear with me.
And make sure you share your screen, or you switch your screen.
Yes, I'll do so. The Google should be showing, Jonathan, I believe. I see it on. All right. I see what he's saying. Okay, so you should have an aerial of this area here on the lower left is the city center. And this building here is the old Town and Tennis building, which used to be interior racquetball courts and tennis courts. It was converted probably over 10 years ago into an office and a roofed garage, parking garage. We had a contractor that purchased the building that has made various improvements into the office area for their business, and then they're moving in a manufacturing facility into where the old covered garage is. And what they're doing, and what these plans are going to reflect, is that they would like in the interior between these two buildings is put solar panels along the incline here of the building, and that would kind of look or mimic this right here. And I'm gonna, bear with me 1 second here. So the office component of the building is here. Here's the interior courtyard, and I'll go back to the Google in a second. And this is where the solar panels would be sloped inward, and then that slopes outward to the north. So now I'm going to go back to that Google view so you can take a look again. And I apologize if it's confusing. So the solar panels, if my mouse is coming out on the screen, would be right here in this area. They would be against the roof and in the interior. So they're not out on these ends or facing, of course, north, which wouldn't make them effective. But, you know, they're within the confines of the area. And we just wanted to bring that to the commission's attention. The other thing is that the roof has always been this color. It's been steam washed recently, so it's a little of a brighter white. The panels themselves, you know, don't come in white. There are going to be darker reflective materials that are going to be along there, that area. But again, it'll be within the interior of the two inclines. Glad to answer any specific questions And I'm going to show again the picture of the plans that were received one more time along there.
I think that's fabulous.
Okay.
I think we should be encouraging that. Yeah, this is the same property we recently did a variance for the parking lot, if I remember correctly.
That is correct, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, I concur with Mike.
Okay. All right. So we just wanted to bring those two items to the commission's attention. Appreciate your interest in both Jonathan and I with those decisions. Okay. On our reports, council will be having a meeting next week on the 10th, and then their second meeting scheduled for the 24th. But that's also Thanksgiving week, and traditionally the council has canceled or only met once in December and once in December. Excuse me, once in November, once in December. Their December schedules are December 1st for work session, and then meetings on the 8th and the 22nd. Again, I would assume that, and when the council liaison speaks, that those are probably at least one of those three will be canceled. For us, the commission, our next meeting is November 19th. Right now, I think we have, it may be possible, 3 petitions, 2 to deal with residential alterations, additions of that nature. And the other, the third, will be a 8-lot residential subdivision preliminary plat. We'll get more into the specifics in there, and it's not often that we have plats and plats of that size come before the commission. Our December schedule will be on the 3rd and the 17th, and of course, both those dates do not conflict with any of the traditional observances during that month, so I don't anticipate any deferrals. We'd like to coordinate with the city attorney of trying to meet on that 3rd, December 3rd, with the commission to again kind of tackle a couple of things, both the remaining issues regarding the urban agriculture, and then talk about the variances and variations. For our 2021 schedule, which is just around the corner, the January meetings will be on the 7th and the 21st. All right, regarding city events, the Dillman Road closure, they're working hard to see if the access on Dillman can be fully operable by Thanksgiving. And it should meet, the weather's been pretty cooperative. There's always these unforeseen utility issues and things, but overall things are going well, and they should be milling that road also before the end of the year on there. For Ashby Road, that is a county project, and again, the best we can get is that they plan to be done on that railroad bridge by year's end. Don't forget, 7th annual Turkey Trot registration is ongoing right now. Regarding COVID-19 info and updates, of course, we continue to have our mandatory mask policy. The park facilities are open, but following social distancing requirements. And municipal court has gone virtual, and I think they've done at least 3 court sessions, and it's gone smoothly. For those of you that are interested, this Saturday here at the City Center, beginning at 9 o'clock till noon, there will be an electronic waste disposal for recycling, document shredding, and a prescription drop-off event for free. There are fees for monitors or TV screens depending on their size and type, but most of it will be free for the shredding and for the prescription drop-offs. Next week on Tuesday, November 10th, Jonathan has coordinated with Rob Kennedy with the Missouri Botanical Gardens to have a discussion on rainscaping during the Zoom with the mayor. I encourage you guys to attend, and Jonathan worked hard to get that coordinated. And this all kind of relates back to our stormwater management plan and implementing some of the things or suggestions that will come about that, and that component being, we talked about, the education process. So Mr. Kennedy, we'll be doing this via Zoom, and the link will be posted on our city's website. On November 18th, 2 Wednesdays from now, the Great Rivers Greenway organization will have a public hearing regarding the Centennial Trail and provide an update in regards to the progress of the extension from Olive and I-170 all the way down to Warson Park. And of course, the implementation of phase 1, which is doing the trail between Warson on the west and Dealman on the east, which is going to be the first phase, and also kind of look at how they'll address the new community center and the Warson Park improvements. That being said, if you get an opportunity, the Zooms with the mayor are accessible via YouTube under the City of Olivet, and our Parks Director, Ms. Knight, gave a presentation of the latest updates regarding the implementation of the Parks Master Plan, along with Proposition C. And and I'm sorry, I tried to get these from the YouTube screen, kind of indicating, now that the bond has been approved. They have been working diligently regarding to preparation of construction plans, and they held their first public meeting to kind of present some of those plans on the schedule, with the hope to start construction by next year and completion by 2022 in there. And then also updated where they are in the design and implementation process of the parks, and just kind of stealing from their thunder. Here is Warson Park with Warson Road here on the left. This is the old entrance to the park, and this used to be the location of where the old Saints ice rink used to be. And this is just a footprint layout of the proposed community center and the improvements to the park. There's a lot of detail in the presentation that was provided, that's on YouTube. And I don't want to steal their thunder, so I encourage you to take a look at those. But that being said, I anticipate that we will get our sneak peek on this for review. I'm trying to get it before the end of the year. The city's contractor will make their presentation for site plan review in one of our December meetings beforehand. And so again, if you get a chance, there's a lot of good detail in there. It's a really nice building. They've been doing a really good job, but I didn't want to take that away from them because they'll be coming our way, hopefully within the month. On development updates, Olive Crossing, that's the I-170 project. MSD right now has authorization, kind of control of the site for completion of 2 sanitary relief lines. One is called the 82nd Street Relief Line that will be leading to Hilltop. That's nearing completion, and that being said, that means there's going to be some disruption on Olive Boulevard. They're going to be doing some boring and probably some cutting in the street. So just heads up on that. That should be coming soon. And then there's another sanitary relief line that goes south along I-170 and then kind of turns down by Bon Price Terrace and Lane and heads all the way almost up to Oak Estates. And that's the Lindley Sanitary Relief Project. That is ongoing. They're still working on the site there at Olive Crossing for this extension. So once that is set, it will probably be in winter, but the next step from the developer will be starting the grading and the preparation of that site along with the utilities. The city center redevelopment area, the forms, the building is starting to take shape in regards to the garage structure. There is a crane now on the site. Not sure if you noticed that on your way home tonight. And they're going to start bringing in the concrete forms. So things are going to start taking shape there. Now these forms are pretty big, and there'll be huge trucks that will bring them in. And we do anticipate some disruption, and we're trying to coordinate with the contractor so we can put some information out for our residents on this. The Plant Haven Commercial Center at the Old Ponderosa, we have the permit ready. They've been kind of slowed down by COVID and the market conditions, but they're committed to the site. You know, we're hoping that to continue, and that probably won't start till early next year. Easy Storage, also pretty slow progress there. We're still kind of working with them to get some update and status on getting that project moving. They have addressed some of the complaints we had regarding that mound. And of course, that it's been about a month since they kind of flattened that out now. The Firestone project, just a real quick update. They decided to revert back to the original plans. We talked about this at the last meeting, as they were looking to use some cementitious panel boards, but after they made their assessment on their cost and savings, they are going to go with the standard masonry brick building that was before the commission. So be glad to answer any specific questions, Chairman, if there's anything excuse me, else beyond those items or anything I missed.
Anybody have anything else? Okay, Missy, how about council report?
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I could follow up on a couple of things first. Carlos, forgive me multitasking. What's coming with regard to an 8-lot residential coming to PCDC? What did you say about that?
There is a petition for 8-lot subdivision off of Old Bonham Road. There's those. Go ahead.
And when is that coming to PCDC? That was
that will be at our next meeting.
Okay, next meeting. Okay. Next meeting.
It will be introduced at our next meeting.
Okay. I just didn't know when that time was. Okay. Thank you very much for that. Carlos has done a wonderful job summarizing things. I always appreciate everything you all do. But I want to follow up on a couple things again. The 90th video, 90th anniversary video, and an extra little special 30-second video was premiered at the Halloween movie in the parking lot at Stacy. And I don't know how many of you may get your blasts or not, but that 90th anniversary video and the little extra 30-second bite is now on the All That website for you to go look at, since we were unable to be able to do the celebrations together. And that video would have been premiered at our dinner dance if we would have had it in April. So if you're not aware of it, please go, because yes, I'm very proud of that 30-second bite. Okay. The virtual turkey trot. It is still going, as Mr. Trejo has identified, and I kind of want to remind everybody, yeah, this is a lean year. We're not going to get what we typically get out of, the participation, the monetary donations, and the food donations. So we do still have up there within the turkey trot the ability to go ahead and just donate money. So if you want to, feel a little bit more giving this year, because maybe you won't be able to do the things that you would normally have done and provided at a previous turkey trot, please consider a donation in your name or somebody else's name to try to help get that donation up to the level we're attempting to obtain on behalf of the Harvey Kornblum Food Pantry. After that, really just kind of want to say, yeah, probably, if we're going to be busy and have you guys busy, I do believe we'll probably not have a meeting in December. I've really never had a second meeting in November, but, if we're busy and we need to, I know the mayor is encouraging the council to weigh the busyness of what we are and where we are. And thank God we are during this time busy, that we may have the second meeting in November, or a second meeting in December. So, just hold on to your hats for that. That's really all I have to report at this time. If if I don't see you on the 19th, because I might be busy, I again want to thank you all for everything you do. I want you to have a blessed, safe holiday. Stay safe. Things are changing, and it's all for the good. And you are going to be a busy bunch of folks. So take care. Thanks.
And
Great.
Chair, if it's okay, we will kind of show that video. We got a little bit of time. I know it's past 9, but if we can do that real quickly.
Go ahead.
We'll have to start it over because you're not hearing the audio.
Yeah, hey, just give me one quick second.
Hey, Carlos, would you be able to send us the link instead? And we can just watch it individually?
We can figure it out on there. Sorry about that, Mayor or Councilman.
Carlos, why don't you see if you can figure it out and you can show it to us next time?
I will do so. All
Okay.
right.
Does anybody have anything else this evening before we adjourn?
No, ma'am.
No.
Okay, then I will adjourn this evening's meeting.
Good night, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you,
Everybody
everybody.
take care.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
All right, good night.
Please be safe.